The chili cook-off catastrophe. The air thrummed with the vibrant tang of simmering spices, a fragrant haze wrestling with the gritty particles stirred by scuffed boots. Dusty stirred his chili, the ladle's metallic scrape a quiet counterpoint to the rodeo's distant buzz. Since daybreak, he'd been coaxing forth flavor from dried chilies, slowly melting the beef in a savory submission. All seasoned with a guarded blend of herbs his grandmother claimed kept misfortune at bay. The Golden Ladle, awarded at the annual rodeo cook-off, was his target this year. Not for the cash, though that would be welcome, but for recognition. He yearned to be noticed, not just considered the taciturn ranch hand patching fences and nursing ailing calves. Monty Stern Jr. sauntered by, sunlight glinting off his impeccably polished cowboy boots. Still playing chef, Rivers? Thought you'd be shoveling manure where you belong. Monty's chili vessel, a gleaming, pristine thing, perched on a propane burner, attended by a hireling in crisp white. A whiff of truffle oil assaulted Dusty's senses. This was a rodeo, not some fancy bistro. Dusty kept his focus on his bubbling concoction, the surface mirroring the worry creasing his face. Just aiming for a respectable pot, Monty. A harsh laugh, like tires crunching gravel, erupted from Monty. Respectable? Son, my chili is an odyssey for the palate. A flavorful masterpiece beyond your comprehension. He flashed a patronizing wink at his attendant, who responded with an obsequious smile. Dusty was outgunned when it came to resources, but he possessed something Monty clearly lacked: genuine passion. He carefully spooned chili into a scar mug, sampling it with rapt concentration. It begged for something more, a fleeting touch of sweet. He grabbed a jar of wild honey harvested from hives near the creek, adding a delicate thread. Just right. The afternoon oozed onward, each moment marked by the onion's fragrant sputter and the plaintive wail of country music leaking from the rodeo grounds. Finally, the judges materialized, a panel of local figures, their expressions severe, their palates supposedly refined. They ambled from station to station, sampling each entry with practiced ease. Dusty's stomach churned as they approached his setup. The lead judge, a woman whose silver braid cascaded down her back, sampled a spoonful, closed her eyes, and breathed a sigh of contentment. Now that, she declared, is proper chili. Monty sputtered in indignation. But it's made with imported spices and Kobe beef. The judge gifted him a polite, dismissive smile. Taste transcends extravagance, Mr. Stern. A murmur rippled through the crowd as the victor was announced, and the Golden Ladle goes to Dusty Rivers. A wave of surprise washed over the onlookers. As he shuffled forward, a blush creeping up his neck, Dusty felt the Golden Ladle, ridiculously oversized, settle into his rough palm. He offered a weak smile, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm. In addition to the Golden Ladle and a year's worth of bragging rights, the grand prize is a horse, the announcer bellowed. Dusty's breath hitched. A horse. He could finally replace old Bess, who'd been slowing with age. He pictured himself atop a spirited mare, exploring the mesas and canyons he adored. Then they led her forward, not a spirited mare, but Betsy, a sway-backed, hobbling creature, her coat dull and patchy, one eye clouded over, her ribs starkly visible. A collective gasp swept the crowd, followed by cruel snickers. Monty Stern Jr. nearly collapsed with laughter, tears streaming down his face. Dusty froze, the Golden Ladle suddenly leaden in his grip. This wasn't a prize, it was a jest, a calculated humiliation orchestrated by Monty to hammer home his place. He saw the pitying gazes, the stifled laughter. The joy of victory dissolved, leaving a bitter aftertaste of disappointment. He longed to vanish, to become one with the dust and fade into obscurity. He fought the urge to lash out, to smash his fist into Monty's sneering face. But he did neither. Slowly, he walked toward Betsy, his boots sinking into the yielding earth. She flinched at his approach, her good eye wide with apprehension. He reached out, hesitating for a beat before gently stroking her muzzle. Her skin felt coarse beneath his calloused fingers, scarred and worn. But beneath the grime and neglect, he sensed a spark of warmth. Gazing into her good eye, he didn't see a worthless nag. He saw fortitude. He saw a survivor. He saw a kindred spirit. The laughter subsided, replaced by a palpable unease. Dusty ignored the crowd. He ignored Monty. He simply continued caressing Betsy's muzzle, murmuring soft assurances. She's not much of a horse, the announcer stammered, attempting to recover. But she's all yours, Dusty. Dusty's gaze lifted, locking with the announcer's. She's perfect, he declared, his voice surprisingly firm. He took the lead rope from the handler and gently guided Betsy away from the arena, away from the taunting crowd, away from Monty Stern Jr.'s triumphant smirk. He led her toward the setting sun, toward the peace of the stables, toward a fresh start. He didn't know what the future held for them. He didn't know if she could even be ridden. But he knew one thing. He wouldn't abandon her. He would offer her sanctuary, purpose, a chance to mend. He would demonstrate to everyone that even the most broken creature could be cherished, valued, capable of extraordinary things. For reasons he couldn't fully articulate, he knew this was his destined path. As he walked, a profound sense of tranquility descended upon him. The sting of humiliation lingered, but it paled in comparison to something far stronger, a sense of resolve. He was no longer just Dusty Rivers, the unassuming ranch hand. He was Dusty Rivers, the man who took in the crippled mare. And, somehow, that felt like a conquest in its own right. Betsy's new home. The trek back to Dusty's ranch stretched on, an arduous trial after the debacle. Betsy's limp was pronounced, her head bowed as if burdened by the cook-off's gritty residue clinging to her coat. He kept the lead lax, honoring her hobbled gait, offering hushed words of comfort that resonated more deeply within him than she seemed to hear. He sensed the gaze of his fellow ranch hands, their smirks like nettles on his skin, and resolutely ignored them, attuned to the cadence of Betsy's faltering steps and the occasional twitch of her ears in acknowledgement. His spread wasn't much to boast about. A diminutive, time-worn cabin squatted under the oppressive sun, its porch slumping in dejection. Sections of the corral fence tilted at precarious angles, and a riot of weeds choked the remnants of a once thriving garden. A far cry, it was from the Sterns' pristine domain, a stark mirror reflecting Dusty's own languid habits. He'd let things slide, finding refuge in the solitude and the predictable rhythm of his days. Now, observing it through Betsy's weary eyes, a stab of remorse pierced him. "Welcome home," he murmured, the phrase heavy with irony. He guided Betsy into the corral, skirting the section where the posts had succumbed to rot. The other horses, a motley assortment of geldings and mares, clustered at the fence line, their eyes assessing and cautious. Dusty segregated Betsy, leading her to a far corner where a small, rickety shed offered meager protection. "Easy, girl," he soothed, his voice a low rumble. He stroked her flank, feeling the tremor that coursed through her frame. The injury was aged, marked by scar tissue and thickened skin, suggesting prior neglect. Betsy recoiled slightly as he began to cleanse the wound, yet remained steadfast. He spoke softly, his words a soothing unguent against the antiseptic's bite. "Almost done now. Just need to get this grime out." He worked with deliberate care, his brow furrowed in concentration. The quiet was punctuated only by the soft snorts of the other horses and the occasional groan of the aged structure. Finished, he swathed the leg in a fresh bandage, ensuring it wasn't too constricting. "That ought to ease it," he said, stepping back to assess his work. Betsy shifted her weight, testing the dressing. She seemed marginally more at ease, her posture a fraction less rigid. Dusty retrieved a bucket of fresh water and a heaping portion of oats. He observed Betsy as she ate, her movements measured. He registered the subtle way she favored the injured limb, the guarded flicker in her eyes as she scanned the corral. Distrustful, wary, but also, perhaps, a nascent glimmer of hope. He cleared a space within the shed, piling a thick layer of clean hay for her to rest upon. "Get some sleep," he urged, patting her side. "It's been a long day." He paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, "for both of us." As dusk descended, painting long shadows across the ranch, Dusty settled on his porch, his gaze fixed on Betsy. The other ranch hands had ceased their jeering, their interest now piqued by his unwavering dedication to the ailing mare. He could feel their scrutiny, but it held no weight. He possessed direction now, a duty. He had Betsy. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be effortless. Her care would be demanding, a perpetual reminder of his own shortcomings. Yet, as he observed her settle into the hay, her breathing evening out, he experienced a quiet swell of gratification. He hadn't triumphed at the cook-off, not truly. Monty Stern Jr. had guaranteed that. But he had gained something else, infinitely more precious, an opportunity to prove his worth, not to anyone else, but to himself. He would ensure Betsy received the utmost care he could provide, and perhaps, just perhaps, they could mend each other along the way. The conviction settled within him, a solid warmth, a hushed promise carried on the evening air. Limping lightning. The rusty spurs' batwings crashed against their frame as Dusty stepped inside, a wave of discordant sounds, clinking glass, guffaws, and a tinny piano, assaulting his ears. The air, thick with the tang of sour beer, body odor, and a questionable stew, pressed down on him. Eyes glued to the splintered planks underfoot, he tried to become invisible as he shuffled towards the bar. "Well, if it isn't the man with the Midas touch," a booming voice ribbed him. It was Hank, a cowboy broad as a wagon, whose mustache resembled a pair of steer horns. A chuckle rippled through the room. Dusty ignored him, focusing solely on the barkeep polishing the scarred wood. "Whiskey," he muttered, barely audible above the clamor. "Whiskey for what was it?" The crippled Comet's owner needled a reedy voice, "Jeb, all sinew and spite." The laughter intensified, punctuated by whoops. Dusty's jaw tightened, his knuckles bone-white as he gripped the counter. The whiskey burned going down, a welcome burn against their mockery. He was an easy target, sure, never the fastest hand or the luckiest gambler. And Betsy's condition was a public indictment, a walking, breathing testament to his failures. He flagged down the barkeep for another shot, hoping to drown the shame. But the jabs kept coming, an unrelenting flurry of insults. Each one stung. He finished his drink and spun around, desperate to escape the stifling atmosphere. Leaving so soon, Rivers, a voice smooth as river stones drawled, halting him. It was Montgomery Stern Jr., perched on a stool near the back, a coterie of admirers draped around him. Monty's immaculate attire was a stark contrast to the rough-spun look of the other patrons. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass with a casual elegance. His eyes, sharp and cold, shone with cruel amusement. "I must say, Rivers, you have a knack for the unique." "A lame mare?" Inspired. The laughter around Monty was louder, more forced. Dusty felt a slow simmer of anger in his gut. He took a step forward, fist-balling. "Got something you want to say, Stern?" he growled, his voice a low rumble. Monty arched a brow, a smirk playing on his lips. "Merely an observation, Rivers. No need to get your chaps in a knot. Though I doubt those old things see much action these days anyway." Another step. His gaze locked on Monty's. He could feel the blood rushing to his face, the urge to smash that self-satisfied look plastered on his face rising within him. Then, Betsy flashed into his mind, lying injured in the makeshift stall he'd built. The flinch in her eyes when he touched her, the distrust there. The flicker of something like hope when he cleaned her wound. He couldn't afford a brawl with Monty Stern Jr. not now, not with Betsy needing him. He drew a deep breath, forcing himself to regain control. He unclenched his fists, the rage ebbing. "You're right, Stern," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "Haven't been doing much writing lately. Been busy with other things." He pivoted and shouldered his way out of the saloon, leaving Monty and his entourage guffawing behind him. The cool night air was a balm to his flushed face. He walked with purpose towards the ranch. Approaching the small corral where Betsy was housed, he heard her soft neigh. He scaled the fence and moved towards her, his steps slow and careful. She stood in the shadows, head drooping. He reached out, hesitant, and gently stroked her neck. She recoiled slightly at first, then seemed to relax beneath his touch. "Easy, girl," he murmured, his voice a soothing caress. "It's okay. It's just me." He examined her wound, applying fresh salve. This time, she didn't resist, allowing him to tend to her without protest. As he worked, his thoughts drifted back to Monty Stern Jr. and his cutting remarks. The saloon's laughter, the humiliation. But he also remembered Betsy, her fragile strength, the spark of something within her. He knew the road ahead would be long. He knew he had much to prove. Yet, looking at Betsy, he understood he wasn't alone. They were both wounded, both struggling, but maybe, just maybe, they could find healing together. A gentle giant. The sun, less scathing than the day before, burnished the dust devils dancing across the ranch yard with a warm glow. Dusty hobbled out of the shack, his body a mirror of Betsy's stiff movements. Sleep had offered little solace, his mind a broken record of Montgomery Stern Jr.'s derisive smirk and the bitter taste of defeat. But the sight of Betsy, ears pricked despite her bandaged leg, nudging a discarded apple core with soft lips, eased the ache within him. He cleaned the stall, the rhythmic scrape of the shovel a grounding rhythm against the backdrop of meadowlark song. The air, clear and invigorating, carried the scent of sage and sun-baked soil. As he worked, a small cluster of children, ranging from about 6 to 10 years old, cautiously approached the fence. A ragtag bunch, some barefoot, others in patched denim. Their faces held a blend of curiosity and hesitancy. Dusty straightened, leaning on the shovel handle. He hadn't seen kids around here in ages. "Mornin'," he greeted them, his voice rough from disuse. A little girl, her pigtails the color of pale corn silk, clutching a drooping dandelion, edged forward. "Are you the Golden Ladle Man?" A pang of shame shot through Dusty. "Used to be," he mumbled, spitting a stream of tobacco into the dirt. "We heard you got a horse." A boy with a gap-toothed grin chimed in. "A really, really hurt one." Dusty steeled himself for jeers, but instead, he detected genuine concern in their young faces. "She's minned in," he replied, nodding towards Betsy. The children edged closer to the barrier, their murmurs like the susurrus of wind through leaves. Betsy, normally skittish around strangers, held her ground. Dusty held his breath, ready to intervene at the first sign of panic. The girl with the dandelion extended it toward Betsy, her small hand trembling slightly. "This is for you," she offered, her voice a mere whisper. Betsy lowered her head, her gentle brown eyes locked on the fragile bloom. Cautiously, she stretched out her muzzle and delicately plucked the dandelion from the girl's hand, her lips barely grazing the child's skin. Dusty gaped, astonished. He'd never witnessed such gentleness in Betsy. With him, she was always wary, accepting his care with a touch of suspicion. But with these children, she was transformed, almost maternal. The children giggled, emboldened by Betsy's acceptance. They reached through the wire, stroking her muzzle, her neck, whispering secrets in hushed voices. Instead of recoiling, Betsy leaned into their touch, her body relaxed, her eyes drooping. Dusty watched, a knot forming in his throat. He was seeing a different creature, one capable of trust, affection, something far deeper than a beast of burden or a racing machine. He saw a being that could connect, especially with the pure hearts of children. An idea flickered in his mind, a spark of hope in the gloom that had enveloped him. He recalled the thin, ill-cared-for ponies he'd seen at the county fair, the heavy-handed treatment they endured from novice riders. He imagined the simple joy a child could find, learning to ride a gentle, forgiving horse. "She likes you," Dusty said, his voice thick with emotion. "She really likes you." The children's faces lit up with pure joy. They continued to pet Betsy, their laughter echoing across the peaceful ranch. Dusty ambled over to the fence, a renewed sense of purpose surging through him. "Maybe," he said, glancing at the children, then at Betsy, Maybe someday she can give you all rides. A chorus of cheers erupted, the children's excitement contagious. Dusty smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. He looked at Betsy, her legs still wrapped, her future uncertain, but her spirit, he now realized, was far from broken. He saw past the limp, past the fear in her eyes, past the sting of humiliation. He saw a tender soul, a horse with the power to bring happiness and healing to others, and perhaps, in the process, to mend his own wounds. The road ahead remained long and arduous, but for the first time since the disastrous race, Dusty felt like he was headed in the right direction, riding lessons and newfound purpose. A fresh dawn painted the sky with streaks of rose and gold, the crisp air redolent with pine wood and damp earth. Dusty discovered a surprising eagerness within himself. He'd dedicated the previous evening to refining Betsy's saddle, fortifying the aged leather and cushioning areas that pressed against her mending leg. While uncertain if anyone would materialize, the prospect of sharing Betsy's quiet resilience with the local kids stirred a long-dormant anticipation. He guided Betsy toward the small, fenced enclosure abutting his cabin, a modest space, yet secure and relatively level. Soon, a small silhouette appeared, approaching with hesitant steps. It was Abby Johnson, the girl with those keen, watchful eyes. Trailing behind her, like a skittish flock, were several more children, their faces etched with curiosity mingled with timidity. "Mornin', Abby," Dusty greeted, coaxing a smile. "Good to see you. Welcome all. Betsy's ready for some company." Abby advanced, her gaze riveted on Betsy. With a tentative gesture, she stroked the mare's velvety muzzle. "She's magnificent, Mr. Rivers." Dusty chuckled softly. "Beautiful clear through that one is, and tough as nails. Don't let the limp fool you." The following hour unfolded with Dusty patiently laying out the fundamentals of horsemanship. He explained how to manage the reins, maintain balance in the saddle, and communicate with Betsy through gentle words. He began with Abby, carefully assisting her onto Betsy's back. The other children observed, initial shyness giving way to captivated attention. "Just relax now, Abby," Dusty advised, his voice a soothing balm. "Feel her rhythm. She'll guide you." Initially, Abby was rigid, her grip on the reins too firm. However, as Betsy commenced her slow, measured walk, Abby's posture relaxed. A delicate smile graced her lips. "She's so gentle," Abby breathed, her voice laced with wonder. One by one, Dusty assisted each child onto Betsy's back. He accompanied them, hand on the reins, offering words of encouragement. He demonstrated how to brush Betsy's coat to a gleaming sheen, inspect her hooves, and whisper secrets into her receptive ear. Giggles and shouts of delight resonated through the air, intermingling with Betsy's soft, comforting neighs. He observed Billy, a freckled boy known for his boisterous, often disruptive behavior in town, become remarkably focused and tender as he groomed Betsy. Sarah, a quiet, bookish girl, discovered a newfound confidence as she steered Betsy around the perimeter. Dusty found himself swept up in their happiness. He hadn't fully appreciated how much he had missed the carefree sounds of children at play, the simple satisfaction of sharing a cherished passion. He watched as Betsy, despite her physical limitations, seemed to revel in the attention, her eyes softening with each affectionate touch. As the sun began its descent, casting elongated shadows across the valley floor, the children regretfully prepared to depart. They lavished Betsy with final pats and promised to return the following day. Abby lingered, her eyes bright with unspoken gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Rivers," she said, her voice earnest. This was the best day ever. Dusty grinned, a genuine expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "You're welcome, Abby. Glad you enjoyed it. And the name's Dusty." As the children vanished down the dusty track, Dusty stood in solitude with Betsy, the quiet punctuated only by the evening chorus of crickets. He leaned against Betsy's warm side, experiencing a tranquility he had thought lost to him. The humiliation of the chilly cook-off, The lingering sting of being a local joke seemed to recede into insignificance, supplanted by a revitalized sense of purpose. He was more than just Dusty Rivers, the down-on-his-luck cowboy who'd won a lame horse. He was Dusty, the man who brought joy to these children, who offered them a connection to something larger than themselves. He glanced down at Betsy, her eyes nearly closed in contentment. "We did good today, girl," he murmured, stroking her thick mane. "We did good." He was aware of the challenges that lay ahead. Betsy's recovery was ongoing, and he wasn't sure how long he could sustain these complimentary lessons. Yet, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Dusty felt a flicker of optimism, a conviction that he might finally be on the correct course. It wasn't a path paved with fame or accolades, but with something infinitely more meaningful: connection, a sense of belonging, and the deep satisfaction of impacting lives, one horseback ride at a time. The challenge. The afternoon heat settled on Dusty's shoulders as he observed Abby's tender grooming of Betsy's mane. The mare stood placidly, a gentle behemoth enjoying the attention. Giggles rippled through the autumn air as other kids took turns guiding her around the small enclosure. Despite her pronounced limp, Betsy carried herself with such quiet grace that the children instinctively treated her with unexpected gentleness. A long shadow bisected the paddock. Dusty glanced up to see two figures blocking the sunlight. One was a tall, rugged man in a battered Stetson, his face etched with the map of a hard life. Beside him stood a younger version, leaner but sporting the same disdainful line to his jaw. Dusty knew them instantly: Mr. Stern, lord of the vast Stern Ranch, and his son, Monty. Mr. Stern's gaze swept over the scene, lingering on Betsy's uneven gait. A dry chuckle escaped his lips. "Rivers," he called, his voice cutting through the quiet. "So, this is the Golden Ladle's star attraction?" A crippled has-been. A familiar prickle of anger warmed Dusty's face. He moved to stand between the Sterns and the kids. "She's got more grit than most horses around here," he said, his voice leveled. Monty Stern Jr. scoffed, a picture of immaculate riding attire, clearly untouched by honest work. Grit? A strange claim for something that can barely hobble. He leaned against the fence, his gaze sweeping over Betsy before landing on Dusty with open contempt. "Looks like you found yourself a real gem, Rivers. A joke, if you ask me." Dusty ignored the jab, schooling his features into neutrality. He denied Monty the satisfaction of a rise. "The kids seem to like her," he countered, nodding toward Abby, now weaving a ribbon into Betsy's tail. "Kids will latch on to anything," Monty sneered. "Especially the freebies." He straightened, a nasty light flickering in his eyes. "Tell you what, Rivers, let's make things interesting, a friendly wager." Dusty's stomach clenched. He recognized that tone, a prelude to trouble he'd heard too many times. "I'm not much for wagers," he replied, trying to keep his voice even. "Oh, come now," Monty persisted, a cruel grin spreading across his face. "Don't tell me you're afraid. How about a little race? My stallion against that thing." He waved a dismissive hand toward Betsy. The children froze, their eyes wide with mounting dread. Abby's hand paused mid-braid. Dusty felt their collective gaze, a potent mix of fear and anticipation. Mr. Stern remained a silent observer, his expression an inscrutable mask. He seemed perfectly content to let his son orchestrate the scene, watching with cool detachment. Dusty swallowed. He knew Betsy was incapable of running. It was utter madness. But refusing would be perceived as cowardice, not just by Monty Stern, but by everyone present. And he wouldn't allow that in front of the children. "I don't think that's wise, Monty," Dusty offered cautiously. "Betsy isn't built for racing." Monty's grin widened. "Precisely. That's what makes it so entertaining. Relax, Rivers. I'll even spot you a head start, just to even the playing field. It's not a question of fair, Monty." Dusty's tone grew sharper. "It's about what's right for the horse." He glanced at Betsy, who watched with her usual calm intelligence. He couldn't subject her to that. Not for pride, not for anything. "So, you're backing down?" Monty taunted, his voice dripping with scorn. "I thought you possessed more nerve than that, Rivers." "Guess you're just another has-been," clinging to an animal beyond repair. The words stung, but Dusty held his ground. He refused to be drawn in. "I'm not backing down," he said, his voice firm and low. "I'm merely not foolish enough to endanger her for your amusement." Monty's face flushed with rage. He began a retort, but Mr. Stern cut him off with a raised hand. "Enough, Monty," he commanded, his voice hard. He turned his cold gaze back to Dusty. "Perhaps a race is not the most suitable challenge. However, I commend your protective spirit, Rivers. It indicates a certain devotion." He paused, a flicker of something indecipherable in his eyes. Yet, devotion without tangible results is ultimately without value. He turned and strode away, Monty trailing behind, still simmering with frustration. As they vanished over the crest of the hill, Dusty exhaled slowly, the tension gradually ebbing away. He looked at Betsy, then at the children, their expressions a blend of relief and disappointment. He knew he'd made the correct choice, but he also knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that this was far from over. The real test, in some guise or another, had only just begun. For the love of Betsy. The dust cloud from the Stearns truck hadn't quite dissipated when Abby, pigtails twitching with excitement, tugged at Dusty's worn denim sleeve. "You gotta, Dusty." He glanced down, a question etched on his face. "Gotta do what, darlin'?" "Orchestrate a heartbreak for Betsy." A fervent denial burst from Abby, louder than any sound he'd heard from her. "Race. For Betsy. To prove them wrong." Sensing a chance for defiance, the other children echoed her plea. Even little Timmy, usually lost in his own dirt world, bobbed his head with conviction, clutching a dandelion like a tiny weapon. Dusty lowered himself to one knee, his joints singing their familiar chorus of complaint. "Prove what, Abs? That a gimp horse can fly like the wind? That ain't reality." "Show them she matters," Maria interjected, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Mr. Stern dismissed her like garbage. Prove him wrong. Their fervent belief caught him off guard. He hadn't fully grasped the emotional turmoil, the casual wager, the dismissive insult had ignited in them. They saw Betsy not as damaged goods, but as something more. An emblem, perhaps, of resilience, of quiet rebellion. His gaze drifted to Betsy, standing placidly under the sprawling oak, flicking flies with her tail. He pictured the quiet fire that smoldered beneath her gentle surface. Could he turn a deaf ear to the yearning on their faces, the unwavering faith they invested in a horse the world had written off? "It's tilting at windmills," he mumbled, more to himself than to the eager faces before him. But even as the words left his lips, something within him began to thaw. He'd spent years cultivating invisibility, sidestepping confrontation. But Betsy had disrupted that, drawing him into the light, whether he was ready or not. But Abby persisted, her voice a fragile thread of hope. He met her gaze, seeing reflected there Betsy's image, a distorted reflection of himself, and something he thought he'd lost forever. He glimpsed the ghost of the man he once aspired to be, the one he'd prematurely eulogized. Dusty expelled a weary breath, the weight of past burdens settling heavy. "All right," he conceded, the word a gravelly rumble. "All right, I'll do it." A cheer erupted, an unrestrained wave of pure joy washing over him. Even Betsy seemed to respond, lifting her head with a renewed alertness. "But," he cautioned, raising a weathered hand, "this isn't for Stern. It's not about winning. It's for Betsy, and we're going to do it smart." As the sun began its fiery descent, painting the sky in vibrant strokes, the gravity of his commitment settled in. He approached Betsy, stroking the velvety softness of her muzzle. "We've got work ahead of us, girl," he murmured. The following days dissolved into a focused haze of considerate training. Dusty refused to push her, to demand miracles. He concentrated on fortifying her sound leg, nurturing her confidence. They ambled through the fields, allowing her to graze and stretch, freedom in every step. He kneaded her muscles, searching for areas of tightness. The children joined in, grooming her coat until it gleamed, braiding her mane, and serenading her with gentle melodies. Abby, particularly, displayed a special bond with Betsy. She'd whisper secrets, her voice a calming balm, and Betsy would respond by nuzzling her affectionately. Dusty watched, a warm sensation expanding in his chest. He hadn't realized the depth of his yearning for connection, for belonging. He was still far from certain about the future, yet for the first time in years, a fragile spark of hope flickered within him. He was under no illusion that Betsy would become a racing legend. The aim was much higher. The aim was to prove to Stern, to the town, and ultimately to himself, that even a crippled horse, a broken man, possessed inherent worth, possessed courage, possessed a capacity for unconditional love. The eve of the race found Dusty standing in the paddock, observing Betsy as she grazed peacefully. He dispensed with the saddle, opting for only a lightweight blanket. He knew the odds were stacked insurmountably against them, but he also knew they weren't alone. He had Abby, Maria, Timmy, and the rest of the children standing with him. And he had Betsy, her spirit undaunted, her heart a steady drumbeat of defiance. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and felt the familiar ache resonate in his bones. But this time, mingled with the pain, was a resolute determination. It was a vow to Betsy, to the children, and to himself that he would not yield, not without a valiant fight, a fight fueled by the love for Betsy. The race. The sun beat down on Harmony Creek, baking the dust of the makeshift racetrack into a shimmering haze. More people than Dusty thought lived in the county had gathered. Wagons and trucks lined the perimeter, their tailgates lowered, becoming impromptu picnic tables laden with fried chicken and potato salad. The air crackled with anticipation, thick as the smell of horses and hot dogs. Dusty felt the familiar sting of nerves, amplified tenfold. He adjusted Betsy's simple saddle, the leather worn smooth with age, not prestige. Betsy, oblivious to the spectacle, munched contentedly on a handful of oats Lily offered, her good eye blinking slowly. He ran a hand down Betsy's neck, feeling the coarse hair under his palm. "Easy, girl," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the rising murmur of the crowd. He wasn't sure if he was comforting her or himself. Monty Stern Jr. arrived in a cloud of dust and arrogance, riding a gleaming chestnut stallion that pranced and snorted like it knew it was royalty. Monty, perched atop the magnificent animal, was the picture of smug confidence. His riding breeches were spotless, his boots polished to a mirror sheen. He looked every inch the champion. "Well, Rivers," Monty drawled, his voice carrying across the track. "Decided to show up after all? I admire your tenacity. Pity it's misplaced." He laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound that grated on Dusty's nerves. Dusty ignored him, focusing on Betsy. He tightened the girth, double-checking the buckle. He knew Monty was trying to get to him, trying to rattle him before the race even began. He wouldn't give him the satisfaction. The starting gun, a rusty old shotgun held aloft by the town's ancient sheriff, boomed, sending a flock of startled crows scattering from the nearby trees. Dusty squeezed Betsy's sides gently, and she lumbered forward, her gait uneven but determined. Monty's stallion shot out like a rocket, leaving Dusty and Betsy in a wake of swirling dust. The crowd roared, a wave of sound that washed over Dusty. He could see the faces, a blur of excitement and disbelief. He caught Lily's eye. She gave him a thumbs up, her face beaming with encouragement. Dusty settled into a steady rhythm, urging Betsy forward at a pace she could manage. He wasn't trying to win, not really. He just wanted to show them all what she could do. Monty, well ahead, was riding aggressively, pushing his stallion to its limits. He glanced back, a sneer twisting his lips when he saw Dusty and Betsy trailing behind. That's when he made his move. As they rounded the far turn, Monty deliberately cut in front of Dusty, forcing Betsy to swerve sharply to avoid a collision. The sudden movement threw Betsy off balance, her bad leg buckling beneath her. She stumbled, nearly going down. Dusty reacted instantly, hauling back on the reins and leaping from Betsy's back. He landed hard on the dusty ground, the impact jarring his bones, but his only thought was for Betsy. "Easy, girl, easy," he soothed, his voice filled with concern. He knelt beside her, checking her leg for any sign of further injury. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath. Monty, realizing what he'd done, slowed his stallion to a trot, a flicker of something that might have been regret crossing his face. But it vanished quickly, replaced by his usual arrogance. "Looks like your nag couldn't handle the pressure, Rivers," he called out, his voice laced with disdain. "Maybe you should stick to chili." Dusty ignored him. He ran his hand down Betsy's leg, feeling for any heat or swelling. She was trembling, but seemed otherwise unharmed. He looked up at her, her one good eye filled with trust. In that moment, surrounded by the hushed crowd and the cloud of dust, Dusty knew he had made the right decision. Winning didn't matter. Proving Betsy's worth did. And he would do that, one step at a time. Pride of the riders. Dusty knelt beside Betsy, his hands gently probing the contours of her quivering leg. "Easy now, girl. Easy," he soothed, the sound vibrating against her warm coat. The crowd, briefly silenced by the near disaster, erupted anew, a murmur of speculation and concern rippling through the air. Nearby, Monty Stern Jr., perched arrogantly atop his obsidian stallion, executed a flamboyant turn, a self-satisfied smirk etched on his features. "Looks like your charity case finally cashed out, Rivers. Should have known better than to pit her against real competition." Dusty tuned him out, utterly absorbed in Betsy's well-being. He felt the tremor that racked her frame, a physical manifestation not only of pain, but of an iron will refusing to surrender. Their eyes met, her deep brown gaze reflecting a weariness that often mirrored his own. "We can quit, Betsy. Just walk back to the stables." A flicker ignited within her, something beyond simple exhaustion. It was a spark of defiance that resonated with him. A soft snort escaped her nostrils, a plume of white dissolving in the crisp autumn air. Abby Johnson, her face etched with worry, elbowed her way through the spectators. "Dusty, is she all right?" He glanced up at Abby, her sincere concern a sharp counterpoint to Monty's callousness. "She's resilient," he replied, his voice thick. "The decision is hers." With deliberate slowness, Dusty rose and resettled himself in the saddle. The familiar weight of the reins grounded him. Leaning down, he murmured into Betsy's ear, "We don't have to do this, girl. But if you're game, I'm with you every step of the way." Beneath him, he sensed a shift, a subtle gathering of strength coursing through Betsy. Her ears perked, her gaze laser-focused on the distant finish line. The spark in her eyes intensified, now a steady burn of resolve. Dusty inhaled deeply and tightened his legs. "All right, girl," he said, his voice steady and resolute. "Let's give them something to remember." They started at a measured pace, Betsy cautiously testing her stride. Dusty felt the lingering ache in her gait, a constant reminder of her injury, yet also a surge of indomitable spirit. A gentle nudge of his heels served as a silent encouragement. Monty, spotting their movement, offered a derisive guffaw, aiming for the participation ribbon. "Rivers, that's about your speed." Dusty ignored him, his senses attuned to Betsy's rhythm, the cadence of her hooves, the crisp wind against his skin. He felt an inexplicable bond, a shared understanding forged in hardship and perseverance. As they approached the final curve, Betsy tapped into an unseen reserve. Her pace quickened, strides lengthening. Dusty felt the burgeoning power beneath him, a force that defied her advanced age and the damaged leg. He glanced right. Monty, still in the lead, was driving his stallion mercilessly, his face a grimace of intense concentration. But Betsy was closing the gap, eating up the ground with each determined stride. The crowd roared, a tidal wave of sound engulfing them. Dusty heard the encouraging shouts, the cheers for Betsy, the rising note of disbelief directed at Monty. With a final, Herculean effort, Betsy drew level with Monty's stallion. For a breathtaking instant, they were deadlocked, two powerful animals, propelled by contrasting desires, locked in a desperate sprint. Dusty leaned forward, urging Betsy onward. He felt the powerful contraction and release of her muscles, her heart hammering in unison with his own. He could see the finish line, the checkered flag of promise in the distance. And then, with an unexpected burst of acceleration, Betsy surged forward. A nose ahead of Monty's stallion, she crossed the line, a triumphant sound erupting from the crowd. The din was overwhelming. The spectators surged forward, enveloping Dusty and Betsy in a wave of jubilation. Abby embraced Dusty, her face radiant with pride. Monty sat astride his steed, stunned in his silence, his face a portrait of fury and disbelief. He had been defeated, not by a pedigree champion, but by a crippled mare and a has-been cowboy. Dusty slid from the saddle, his legs unsteady from exhaustion and elation. He embraced Betsy, burying his face in her fragrant mane. "We did it, girl," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. "We actually did it." The town celebrated late into the night. The golden ladle became an afterthought. The only prize that truly mattered was the heart, the unwavering resolve, the defiant spirit of a wounded horse and the man who believed in her. Betsy was elevated beyond mere equine. She represented hope, a testament to the strength found in unity and courage. She was, beyond question, the pride of the riders.